What romantic movie is beloved by many, but actually has a terrible message? The kissing booth pisses me off so much. The girl and her best friend have a deal that they won't date each other's siblings. Except she doesn't have any siblings, so she just can't date his brother. Then some jerk slaps her ass because her skirt was too short, and they both get detention. And in detention, the perv starts flirting with her, and she agrees to go out with him. Then he stands her up because apparently the older brother has a school-wide rule that no one is allowed to date her, and she finds that cute for some reason. And then she starts secretly dating him, but the best friend finds out and gets mad, and somehow she's in the wrong. But he's not mad about the secrets. He's mad because his brother gets everything he wants, and she was the one thing that was his. So yeah, literally every guy is possessive and controlling and weird, and it really upsets me that anyone finds it romantic in the least uneasy face.
I get why you're frustrated. That scenario just doesn't make sense. The whole idea of possessiveness being viewed as romantic seems off. It's wild when characters put up with such controlling behavior, but it's treated as normal. It's hard to relate when friendship and boundaries are tossed aside for drama. I guess it's a reminder that not all romantic narratives are healthy or realistic.
Not one specific movie, more of a trope. You've Got Mail is one example. When the leads are already in steady, healthy relationships, their partners do literally nothing wrong, or maybe something minor wrong, but they meet each other and fall in love, and it's like their partners don't even exist. We're supposed to completely ignore the fact that they are cheating, or at the very least flirting and having an emotional affair, simply because the clicks so well or their partner is a bit boring.
Yeah, that trope is definitely something. Like you see these characters spark chemistry and forget all about their current partners. It's puzzling how we're meant to root for them, even when their relationships aren't really bad. It just feels a bit off since they're cheating in a way, sometimes on good people. Makes you think about how easily people can sway when something new and exciting comes along.
Never Been Kissed. It's about dorky, anal retentive, and slightly frumpy journalist who was chosen to go undercover as a high school student to see what high school is really like and uncover dramas, which is a nonsense premise. She's unable to become friends with the popular crowd. Stuff happens to change that, and eventually the big story that her newspaper wants to pursue is getting a teacher who is seemingly interested in her to act on / confess his attraction for her, all the while the journalist is presenting herself as a student. This is hard to watch because she feels bad for him and doesn't want to damage his career / reputation, but he's literally falling for a person who he knows as a student. This is so inappropriate. The conclusion is her revealing her true identity as he's about to confess, so he storms off, but the last scene of the movie is them reuniting and the newspaper being like woman shrugging, we're so happy they ended up together. She also says she has been kissed before, but not like a romantic energy with Sparks kiss, so the movie title is also stupid.
This sounds like a mess. The whole undercover thing just screams cringe. The journalist pretending to be a student, you can't help but feel for the teacher. Yeah, he probably liked her for real, but the whole situation is so wrong. It's awkward to think about the blow to his reputation if anyone found out. And then they end it with them together? Feels forced, like they just wanted a happy ending without really earning it.
Any movie where the lead character has to break up with their long-term partner because they're too busy with work, despite the fact that they're always working to finance their lifestyle and pay all the bills. And because of this, the lead ends up visiting home where they run into an old flame who's running a small business that in reality would never be profitable.
I get the struggle. My friend was always hustling to pay the bills and keep a comfortable life, but it took a toll on their relationships. They ended up breaking up with their partner, thinking it would fix things. Then, during a trip home, they bumped into their high school crush who was just getting by with some small venture. It was a weird mix of nostalgia and reality.
The once popular Marilyn Monroe movie Bus Stop, 1956, plays out like a horror movie now. Marilyn plays a waitress who turns down a pea-brained rodeo cowboy. He then aggressively stalks and harasses her for the rest of the movie, eventually kidnapping her. Nobody else in the movie seems to think there's anything wrong with this until way too late.
It's interesting how perspectives can shift over time. I remember watching some classic films with friends and noticing how different themes hit differently today. This story really highlights that. Back then, it might have seemed like just another love story, but now it feels way more intense and problematic. I can't help but think about how important it is to recognize those changes in context when revisiting older movies.
I absolutely love Amelie and have watched it many times, but I can't shake the feeling the Amelie is a stalker. She pursues Nino. Some of her behavior is bordering on obsession. Plus, she plays with people's emotions, like the widow who kept her love letters, and even her father. But despite all of this, I still adore the film though.
I get what you're saying. Amelie does come across as a bit intense with her actions. It's like she bridges the line between quirky and kind of creepy. Yet, the way the film captures the charm of her world still makes it enjoyable. It's interesting how flawed characters can make us appreciate a story even more. Sometimes it's those little contradictions that keep us hooked.
Oh, 13 going on 30. It says please don't pursue your dream job. Better just marry and stay home, because you can't do both. Also Pirates off the Caribbean. All that Elizabeth Swann wanted was being a pirate. She not only makes it on it, but she also was elected pirate queen. Then she resigns to all of that to stay as a single mother that waits for her man to come visit like once every now and then.
Not sure how I feel about that. It seems like both movies send a similar message about dreams and choices. It's interesting how characters start off strong but then end up giving up their goals for relationships. Kind of reflects real life, I guess. Makes you think about the balance between personal ambition and love. Not necessarily a bad path, just a different one.
Grease. I work as a nanny, and the biggest fight one of the parents I work for was over Grease. Mom said 9-year-old should watch it because all her friends' dad was totally against it, said it had a terrible message, and said she was no way allowed to watch it. Mom went and bought the DVD anyway.
That sounds like a classic parent dispute. I remember a similar situation with a friend debating what movies were appropriate for their kids. One parent was all about letting the kids watch whatever, while the other had strict rules. It's funny how much parents worry about messages in movies. In the end, the kids usually just want to watch what their friends are watching.
The Wedding Planner, Something Borrowed, The Sweetest Thing, etc. All with similar plots. Basically, they meet someone they have great chemistry with, but find out they're getting married, so they find ways to sabotage the wedding or wish that somehow the groom-to-be will change their minds by creating opportunities where they can cheat with each other. Something Borrowed is worst offender because the main character betrayed her own best friend. Romantic comedies like these ones always justify the main character's infidelity/lack of morals by making the current girlfriend/fiancé a villain. So it's okay, they deserve to be cheated on. As for the female leads, trying to stop a wedding because you can't let the one get away, and in some cases someone they've known for 2 seconds, is selfish, not romantic.
I get what you mean. These romantic comedies often create this absurd situation where cheating seems justified. It's like they purposefully make the other woman a villain to make the main character's actions okay. I remember a friend getting all hyped over these movies, saying they were cute, but I just found them unsettling. It's hard to root for someone making such selfish choices, you know? It's just not realistic.
I love the movie Cold Mountain for being so true to the Civil War period and because Renee Zellweger's character is fun. But the last time I watched it, the storyline struck me as kind of dumb. The two main characters had a few short conversations. Jude Law's character spends 3 years walking across the country to to come back to her not even knowing if she was still interested or had married or anything. Today it would be like obsessing over someone you texted for 3 years. Not a terrible lesson, but a plot that could only have been written for a sappy romance novel and translated badly onto film.
I get what you're saying. It's interesting how a movie can feel different each time you watch it. The longing and dedication in Cold Mountain can come off as a bit unrealistic, especially if you think about it in modern terms. It highlights the difference in communication then and now. Sometimes, stories like these do seem more suited for a book with flowery language than for a film. Just curious how it holds up now, though.
I'm surprised to not see When Harry Met Sally yet. Harry is literally the worst. He's condescending, callous, argumentative, and just simply an asshole we're meant to be rooting for. He spends an entire scene telling Sally how pretentious she is for liking her food a certain way. Goes on a huge sexist rant and learns literally nothing at the end of the movie.
It's interesting how some characters are framed as the hero despite their flaws. I had a friend like that once. He could be really arrogant and didn't respect others' opinions, especially about personal choices. People still rooted for him, though. It's weird how sometimes we overlook someone's negative traits if we like them for other reasons. Guess it makes you think about what we find forgivable in our relationships.
I hate those so-called romantic movies where the heroine is an accomplished career woman and gets suddenly thrust some random baby in her lap, quits her promising career, moves with baby to a backwater place to marry some unemployed, uneducated hillbilly, to live happily ever after. It's not only nauseating, it's also infuriating that the perpetual message is every successful woman is only happy with a man, giving every dream, desire, and ambition because having a man, preferably with a dozen children, is the true purpose in a woman's life. What kind of message is that to give to young girls in the 21th century?
I get where you're coming from. Those movies tend to push a pretty outdated narrative. It's frustrating to see strong women reduced to just finding a partner. It's like they forget about personal goals and ambitions. It can send the wrong message to younger generations, making them think that their worth comes from relationships instead of their achievements. There's a lot more to life than just settling down, you know?
Mamma mia! Idiot bride thinks that the best way to find out which one of her mother's 3 flings is actually her father is by lying to them and inviting all 3 of them to walk her down the aisle. She could have just asked her mother instead of exposing her flings. Luckily, they all seem to be consensual. The first time she meets them is at her destination wedding. What could go wrong? But it's okay because they'll all dance and sing to ABBA songs. If you wanted to showcase their music, they could have had a better plotline.
Seems like a wild setup for a wedding. Inviting all 3 of her mom's flings without a heads up is bold. Could have just asked her mom directly, but where's the drama in that? At least there's some fun with the music. ABBA definitely brings a certain vibe, even if the plot could use some work. It's like they're trying to turn a family issue into a musical.
Love Actually. It's a guilty Christmas pleasure, but it's a horrible movie about love. Most of the couples are about obsession and infatuation and lust for Colin. Pretty much everyone falls in love with someone they don't even know and or have had a solid conversation with. The famous card scene is about betraying his best friend and his new wife kissing him because he needs to put the emotional weight of his envy and feeling of loss onto someone else. 2 characters don't even understand each other at all since they don't speak each other's languages until he proposes after knowing her as his housekeeper for like a week. The weird jealousy and power the highest position in the country wields over an employee. The only real, true love we see in the movie is Liam Neeson's love for his recently deceased wife and Billy's lifelong friendship with his manager.
I get what you're saying. Love Actually definitely has some odd dynamics going on. A lot of the relationships seem shallow. It's interesting how the movie frames these moments as romantic, but they often seem more like obsession. The real connections are pretty rare, like the ones you mentioned with Neeson and Billy. The rest just schemes the surface, making it feel more like a collection of awkward encounters than real love.
The thing about The Notebook is that a lot of relationships in that time were like that. They were fighting, they were manipulating each other, but they stayed together, and a lot of people think it's something to praise. Both Ellie and Noah seem to have healthier relationships, but they choose to be with each other. Based on the class difference, the relationship should be doomed from the first minutes, but they find a way around, which is also considered something to be praised by a lot. In reality, this kind of relationships rarely work, or if they do work, somehow they are not healthy relationships.
It's interesting how people see The Notebook as a love story when a lot of those dynamics are actually pretty unhealthy. It shows that sometimes people romanticize toxic patterns. Ellie and Noah's connection seems strong, especially with their class differences, but it's not a realistic view of love. In real life, staying in a relationship through drama often just leads to more pain than anything else. People really should think about what's healthy.
Love Actually won. Falls in love with the fat girl even though people made fun of him too. Falls in love with a woman half his age that works as his house cleaner and doesn't speak the same language. 3. Proclaiming your love to someone that married your best friend, and he's still pinned after her when she turned him down.
Love Actually shows different kinds of love. It's interesting how one guy falls for someone others judge based on looks. Then there's the older guy who goes for a younger woman, even with a language barrier. And the guy who can't let go of his feelings for his best friend's wife, even after rejection. It all feels realistic and bittersweet, like love can be messy and complicated sometimes.
The Holiday. The Jude Law/Cameron Diaz parts are very outdated now, with the fact he likes her because he doesn't have to call her after they've slept together, and it makes her not like other girls. I'm not saying she has to demand a relationship or anything, but it feels more like she's a doormat and being rewarded by saying everything he wants to hear, rather than her genuinely not needing anything from him. Just really puts me off whenever it comes on at Christmas. I still do love the Kate Winslet/Jack Black parts though.
I get what you mean. The dynamics in that film can feel dated and a bit off. It's like they tried to portray a certain kind of romance that doesn't really hold up under scrutiny. The parts with Winslet and Black are way more relatable and real. They have a connection that feels more genuine, unlike the other storyline. It's funny how different aspects of a movie can stick with you like that.
Twilight, which I think is the worst one for teens because it romanticizes codependency and obsession. The book explains their love is fate in their supernatural world. She belongs there with him, which doesn't translate well in the movie. That can be a dangerous mindset in a young relationship. Love Actually. Almost every couple is toxic in that one. The woman going after her older married boss, him buying her jewelry, and his wife finding out and staying with him, and the guy in love with his best friend's wife and actively pursues her, and she ends up cheating just because he holds up some note cards. Titanic. I love that movie, but Rose does cheat on her fiancé with a guy she met, even though he's awful. Then she risks her life to stay with him, and she only knew him for 4 days.
I get why you think those stories can be problematic. A lot of films and books do push those unhealthy relationship ideas. Like, I remember a friend who dated someone just like that, super codependent. They thought it was romantic, but it just made everything complicated. Eventually, they realized it wasn't real love. It's interesting to see how media influences our views on relationships, even if we don't notice it at first.
Can't tell you how damaging this was to me as a young man. In my very early 20s, the message I often heard was to be persistent and faithful to unrequited love, when in fact the woman was simply uninterested and I should have stopped wasting everyone's time and moved on to find someone that wanted to be with me. I fear too many people took a similar meaning from that message.
It's tough when you're young and get mixed messages about love. I knew someone who clung to hope like that, waiting for a relationship that was never going to happen. It just kept dragging on, and in the end, it was clear the other person wasn't interested. It wasted time, and he just ended up feeling worse. Sometimes, knowing when to let go is more important than hanging on.
Julia Roberts said on an interview somewhere that Pretty Woman wasn't supposed to be a rom-com when she signed up for it. It was supposed to be about a drug addict hooker and an abusive client, maybe even murder. I'm not sure about that last part. Anyways, it wasn't picked up by the studio, so they changed the script. And it became the rom-com of all times.
That's interesting. It's wild how a script can take such a drastic turn. I mean, imagining Pretty Woman as something dark is pretty different from the rom-com we know. It's like the studio saw something in it that changed its entire direction. Sometimes those unexpected shifts lead to what people love most. Makes you think about how movies can evolve.
Thank you. My sister and I always debate Sleepless in Seattle versus You've Got Mail. I always say I cannot enjoy Sleepless in Seattle because it's incredibly creepy. Not to say You've Got Mail isn't problematic, but at least they know each other, and their feelings are based on positive and negative interactions.
I get that. Sleepless in Seattle does have that whole thing where the guy falls for a woman he's never even met, which can feel off. You've Got Mail feels more grounded since they actually interact and have a back and forth. It's more relatable, I guess. Both movies definitely have their issues, but I can see why you'd lean towards the one that feels less uncomfortable.
I agree this trope is annoying, but don't agree it applies to You've Got Mail completely. They subtly show how the relationships they are already in are very much subpar, unfulfilling, a bit toxic, a lack of true connection, major differences in life priorities, etc. They're both already low-key dissatisfied before they even meet. Their respective partners even hit it off when they meet at a party because they have better matched interests and better connection. The point is to show that sometimes, not always, people don't know what they could have until they're confronted with it, or can trundle along in a dissatisfying relationship because on the surface it seems right.
Yeah, I get that. It's interesting how you can be stuck in a relationship and not realize it's not what you need until something better comes along. I had a friend who was dating someone for years, but they never really clicked. Then one day they met someone new and instantly felt a connection. It was a wake-up call for them to see what was missing in their life. Sometimes you just need that moment to realize what's possible.
That movie is the opposite of a rom-com, but last time I said that I got downvoted LOL. The guy literally destroys her decade-long family business for money, but it's like the movie and everyone in it forgot about it because he brought her soup when she had a cold. The ending of that movie is also incredibly rushed. She only says one line, and then it's over. It was infuriating to watch.
I get what you mean. It's weird how some stories get overlooked because of small gestures. That soup moment really shouldn't overshadow the bigger issues. It's like people pick and choose what to remember. The ending sounds like it left a lot hanging too. You're invested and then it just wraps up with a line. I guess that's the risk with certain movies. Not all stories are told well.
This movie was cited as an example of storytelling in one of my writing classes. It's the same traditional romance. Boy meets girl, boy courts girl, outside influences try to interfere in their relationship. Boy and girl overcome all and end up together forever, except this story is told from the POV of the outside influence, Julia's character, not the main protagonist's POVs. That lesson helped me forgive the movie a little once I understood that. Plus, I've never been without a solid GBF since.
It's interesting how perspectives can change the way we view a story. I remember a movie I didn't like at first, but once I looked at it from a different angle, it clicked. It's like how friends can impact our experiences, too. I have a close friend who's always there, and they've changed my outlook on a lot of things. It's a reminder that there's always more than one side to any story.
Honestly, the best lesson about relationships that I got was from a fanfic. To paraphrase, as an arranged marriage, we didn't know each other. It was awkward for the first few days. Then we sat down and decided to not be strangers anymore, to vow to make this relationship work, and go out of our way to actually put effort into loving and supporting each other. The same applies even for non-arranged marriages. This is why I don't like the move fireproof. The husband tries to fix himself and save their marriage while the wife dicks around with another guy.
I get what you're saying. Relationships need effort from both sides. It's not just about one person trying. In situations where everyone is invested, things tend to improve. That fanfic lesson hits the mark. As for fireproof, it suggests one person can carry the whole load, which isn't realistic. Both partners need to be on the same page for it to work out.
This is the point of Grease, though, is that usually in movies, the bad boy, in this case it's Danny, cleans up his act for the good girl. In Grease, they both become the opposite of where they started. He cleans up, she gets a little edge. It's played for comedy, LOL. It's not something the writers are endorsing. It's a trope they are inverting.
Yeah, it's interesting how the roles flip in Grease. Usually, the nice girl changes the bad boy, but here, they both evolve in unexpected ways. It pokes fun at those typical storylines while still giving us a fun dynamic. You see how the characters grow, and it plays with the whole idea of identity. Just a clever take on those cliches we often see in movies.
It took me a while to actually sit back and watch this movie without my rose-tinted glasses and pay attention to what was happening. Holy shit. I'm still going to crush on Jake Ryan forever, but the rest of that movie, including his own actions, no longer work for me. Used to be my favorite John Hughes movie too.
It's funny how time changes our perspective on things. I remember rewatching a movie I loved as a kid, and a lot of it just didn't sit well anymore. Characters I idolized had flaws I didn't notice back then. I still have that nostalgic crush on the lead, but the storyline felt different. It's interesting how age shifts our view on these classics, making us think twice about what we used to enjoy.
When the books were all out, I read them. Not great books, but something about them was literary crack. I turned friends onto it at the time that said the same thing. But after reading them, it was like barely talk to a guy and you're so in love you're giving up your life. Bullshit. Just such teenage, angsty BS.
I get that. We all have those moments when something seems so intense in the moment, but looking back, it's all pretty superficial. It's wild how easily we fall into those feelings, though. I remember a friend getting really into a series like that. We'd chat about it and realize we were probably overthinking it. Life's more complex than what those stories make it out to be.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.